The name Perkins carved in stone. Below a Gothic tower, a boy navigates with a cane. A title: Preparing Students Who Are Blind or Visually Impaired for Success in College, with Mary Alexander of Learning Ally.
In 1948, a wonderful woman named Anne McDonald was watching World War II veterans return. They had probably what we would call traumatic brain injury today, but they had a lot of vision loss, and they weren't able to access the GI Bill to educate themselves so that they could feed their families. And it was a real problem. Being in New York City, I think she probably saw more than maybe many people would, so she decided to do something. And on the top floor of the New York City Public Library, she started recording books that they needed in school. And it was, so when I read that story, I just get goosebumps, because there was a woman who had no connection to blindness other than she saw a need and she filled it.
We see a photograph of Anne McDonald along with an image of a sound scriber, a device that would record onto vinyl discs to be played back on a record player. This is the device that Anne McDonald and the other volunteers would read into.
So from that point, we grew into an organization that had studios all across the country and many, many, many dedicated volunteers. In the 1990s, we saw that people that weren't blind were starting to want to use our books. There were students that also had a need, but they had no vision impairment, but they did have a learning difference or a learning disability. So because that group kept growing and growing and growing, we expanded, who we served, and our name at that point became Recording for the Blind and Dyslexic. We increased, some of the types of books that we would record at that point. We added more and more of the early childhood books, as well as the college textbooks, the high school textbooks. We made a very deliberate attempt to serve as many of those types of students as we could.
We see and hear a video clip of volunteers recording several different books that will be included in the organization's library and available to people with a variety of disabilities that make it difficult for them to access printed materials.
Clinical programs are now encouraged to collaborate as members of an interactive service team.
First with families whose students have learning disabilities, but also with as we'll talk about later today, about with families that have students that have vision impairment. Students need more than just an audiobook, and we want to support students holistically. We want to support the student with the resources that they need to help them thrive in their education. And so we made the decision a few years ago to change our name to Learning Ally, because we feel like we can be more than an audiobook provider. And so while we still serve the same people with the same types of learning differences, we want to be able to provide services for the whole student rather than just that audiobook content.
Fade to black. The 5 pillars of student success.
The way that Learning Ally likes to determine where there is a need is to use research. We have a lot of specialists who have been with us for a very long time, and we all have our own experiences and our own ideas about what students need. And as well-intentioned as we all may be, we really do want to use research to be sure that, that we're providing a need that is truly out there. And so through research funded for college students that are blind and visually impaired, the Lavelle Fund for the Blind gave us the ability to do some research for college students who were blind or visually impaired. The research showed that they are not arriving on campus as prepared as they need to be. And there's several different areas that there are some real deficits in most college students who are blind. And while our research was based only on a small number of students, and a certain geographical area, the prototype calls that we've done on our program since then have really borne this out. After the research, the insights we've done, a lot of extra calls with students who are blind and visually impaired, and we've pulled together what we consider 5 areas, or inside we've actually called them the 5 pillars of success. We're pretty sure that there are not other resources out there like this, And we want to be able to instill success for these students early on in their college career. And so the 5 pillars consist of managing your professor. So learning how to advocate for yourself, self-determination skills, but it's all the resources that you would need to manage your educational experience.
We see a graphic depicting the first pillar, an orange rectangular column with the title Managing Your Professor and these descriptive phrases: help with advocacy, maintaining assertiveness, and developing empathy.
Becoming a part of your community so that isolation is not an issue for you, so that you can be a part of the classroom. You can also hopefully have a great social experience, and so we're building some pretty cool things around that as well.
We see a graphic depicting the second pillar, a green rectangular column with the heading Becoming Part of the Community and these descriptive phrases: help our learners connect with students, find networks both on and off campus.
Then there's a lot of existing resources on a college campus, but you have to learn how to leverage them. How do you manage the Disability Services Office? How do you manage maybe some of the accessibility tools that you already have with the Disability Service Office? There's a lot of things going on there, and so we've pulled together some very good tools around that.
We see a graphic depicting the third pillar, a blue rectangular column with the heading Leveraging the DSO, or Disability Services Office, and this descriptive sentence: know your legal rights while developing the skills needed to manage formal resources.
Knowing and having a knowledge of learning effectively. How do I learn? How do I need to communicate that, or how much of that do I need to communicate to anybody on campus? And when do I need to use my strategic independence? So when do I need to do it myself? When do I need to ask others for help?
We see a graphic depicting the fourth pillar. It's a gray rectangular column with the heading Learning Effectively, and this descriptive sentence: understand how your visual acuity affects how you learn so that you can become strategically independent.
Probably one of the key things is making the technology work for you. So as we know, there's not a lot of training. Once you get to college, there's not time for training. You need to know how to use the tools that you have, whether they be low-tech or high-tech, and how they can best serve you.
We see a graphic depicting the fifth pillar, a light blue rectangular column with the heading Making Technology Work for You, and this descriptive sentence: help with ways to discover and employ technology for effective learning. Fade to black. Pillar number 1, managing your professor.
Students are very often reluctant to engage the professor. And it goes back to advocacy skills and being able to talk about your disability. If you're not comfortable with that, you are most likely not going to approach your professor or the teaching assistant and say, this was not clear to me, or the professor put something up on the whiteboard that I need access to. Being able to ask for that and to advocate for yourself, it becomes much, much harder if your advocacy skills are lacking, or you're just a shy person in general. Not everyone's an extrovert, and so those are very much learned skills, and students need to arrive at college, having already flexed those muscles, having already exercised that ability, because it won't grow up overnight in college. And so if they're not able to speak about who they are, how they learn, and what they need, then it's going to be a very challenging experience for them.
A photograph shows a college classroom with several students writing notes as the professor stands next to a chalkboard at the front of the room. The professor's handwriting makes it a challenge for a person with normal vision to read. The photo, taken in 2013, also illustrates the lack of accessible technology in many classrooms.
The faculty engagement with students with vision impairments is different everywhere. You cannot say it's bad, or you can't say it's great, because it's different and it's very individualistic, and it depends on the professor, the faculty member. But very often people are not used to dealing with people with vision impairments. It's a low incidence disability, and if they have never interacted with someone who is either low vision or blind, they may be nervous about that. And so the student's ability to put them at ease would go a long way in how successful that interaction is going to be.
Fade to black. Pillar number 2, becoming part of the community.
One of the first and one of the key things that a college student is not prepared to do is to really engage in the classroom in the same way that his sighted peers do. And so the marginalization of our students from the college classroom experience, you know, that experience is one of the key places that you interact with students, you interact with your professor. It's so important, but because of various things, they don't interact in the same way, and they tend to isolate themselves, or the instructor or the college isolates them. And so that's a very key finding, and that creates a sense of being outside of your peer circle and not fully interacting and not participating, you know, in their instruction.
A photograph shows 2 computer workstations set up in a hallway outside of a college disability services office. Above each workstation is a sign that reads, "Attention, this computer is reserved for people with disabilities. Please be considerate." The words "attention" and "disabilities" are in large red print. For students who choose not to disclose their learning differences to peers and/or instructors, the public location and the sign which identifies any user as a person with disabilities might make the workstations a resource they would rather avoid than utilize.
So I have a son who is visually impaired, who is in his first year of college, and I see this happening to him, but it's because of choices that he has made. And so we had a conversation around it, and he just did not have an awareness that that's what he was doing. And so the research showed that, for instance, because of some of their technology that they use, maybe a Braille note taker or a monocular, you know, to be able to see the classroom board a little bit better, a student will purposely isolate themselves from other students within the room. They will sit completely separate from them. One young lady in our research study, she's low vision, but she hasn't really self-identified as a low vision student, and so she refuses to sit at the front of the classroom because she doesn't want to appear. No one else sits at the front of the classroom. I didn't when I was in college, and so she just feels like if she does these things that are going to help her succeed, they just brand her as being different.
In a photograph, we see the young woman that Mary Alexander was referring to. Her face has been intentionally obscured. In the photo, she is studying at a table in her home. She uses a slant board for her textbook to provide assistance accessing the print. In addition, we see her open laptop with a large-scale graphic on the screen. These are accommodations she resists using in public.
One of the reasons students are marginalizing themselves is that lack of self-determination skills. You know, being able to say, this is my vision impairment, this is what it means in my education, and this is what it means as far as how I need to manage the people around me. And so it's a very, very, it's a really big piece to expect 18 and 19-year-old students to walk in the door knowing how to do. That's a big challenge, to do the amount of studying that's required and prep for your studying, and then to try to have a social life on top of that. We talked to several students who felt isolated because of that, but also because they had chosen to live in a single dorm room rather than living with a roommate. Their technology might be loud, their screen reader, you know, might bother someone, or they're working on either a Perkins Brailler or a Braille note taker of some kind, and they don't want to bother someone. So very often the college will make that decision for them and say, you know, for students with disabilities, we put you in a single. Well, right away, you know, that's one of the key places that you make a new friend. Some students also are deliberately steered towards online classes. And so if you're in an online class, the interaction with your peers is very limited.
In a photograph, we see a young man who is blind sitting at a desk in front of his laptop. His face has been purposely obscured. He is logging on to an online class.
You know, that could be a good choice for one of your classes, but that it is very isolating if all of your interactions with school is online. And then the other piece is because they have a vision impairment, you know, when you're walking around campus, they may not have an awareness of what the social opportunities are. You know, very often those are things that are posted on bulletin boards, or that are, there are young people around campus that are handing out flyers, but they just don't know that they're out there. And so they very often do not have those opportunities. We have one young lady that we've made calls with recently that joined a sorority. And she's finding a lot of fulfillment because she's joined a very specific social club, for lack of a better word. But it's a group that she feels a lot of camaraderie with because it's a sorority around education. And it's just worked out so well for her. And she feels, she probably is the student that I've spoken with recently that feels the most social engagement with her community, with her campus. And so I think that's a really good thing to take away from it, is that you have to find a specific social engagement area or place or club and try to become involved in it.
Fade to black. Pillar number 3, leveraging the Disabilities Services Office.
We don't think about every day that we manage people around us. I really had not ever thought about this, but the research showed that a student who is visually impaired has to manage a network of people that is much larger than their sighted peers. So for instance, they need to, because of the law that directs disability services in the college experience, it's called the ADA, or the Americans with Disabilities Act. That's the only law that is in place right now. And it allows for certain accommodations for students. But unlike IDEA, which is what governs students in the K through 12 or secondary educational experience, it isn't proactive. So the student has to be the one who initiates all of these accommodations.
In a photograph, we see a young man who is blind walking in a college hallway. He wears a red t-shirt and a backpack. A sign on the wall to his left reads, Student Services / Testing, Disability Access Center.
So if they don't learn how to manage the Disability Services Office, or they don't learn how to speak with and manage their professor, learn what the professor expects from them, and then be able to turn around and give that back. Very often colleges might want to provide human note takers for students in a class where there's a lot of visual stuff going on the board or on the whiteboard. Those kinds of human interactions are really, that's a sophisticated interaction between two young people that have no experience with it. And so just learning to manage all of those networks around them is just really key in getting through at least that first year of college, because after the first year, you probably intuitively will understand what you need to do. But that very first semester, it can be very challenging. And in our research, we did see a couple of the students not return after the first semester. And those were the key reasons for both of these students were lack of self-identification of their vision impairment, but also that management piece.
Fade to black. Pillar number 4, learning effectively.
You know, these students are so focused on when they get assignments in class, the amount of time that they have to spend in their rooms, heads down, learning, just getting prepared to study. The prep time for study is unbelievable. Because if you have let's say that your professor puts up on Blackboard or on Canvas or whatever the student management tool is that your university uses, they'll put PDFs primarily, and you're supposed to download them. Well, to do that, students are going to have to, first of all, be able to download documents off of a tool like that. Hopefully that tool is accessible to whatever screen reader or note taker that they use, and then manage to get it in an accessible format, because not all PDFs are accessible. The thought or the feeling in the college world is, well, we've made all this digital, but they don't understand that digital is not always accessible. And so just the prep work that they have to go through to get things ready for them to study, and if they do use a human note taker, getting those notes. they don't show up magically right after class, so the time it takes to get the notes, make sure you understand the notes, maybe after back and forth a little bit with your note taker to be sure that you're getting key points on this.
A photograph shows a page in a spiral notebook with handwritten notes taken in a biology class. 3 headings across the top of the page are isotonic, hypertonic, and hypotonic. Below are diagrams describing the 3 states as they relate to the water content in a cell. The diagrams contain arrows which would require more description before they were useful as study notes to a person who is blind or visually impaired.
These students were spending 2 and 3 hours just to prepare to study. That's before they ever get started. And then often you also see them using several pieces of technology to study. So they're maybe putting notes in on their Braille note taker, or writing notes in after reviewing things that are in large print on their screen, maybe doing some things audibly. And so there's a lot going on for them, and so they're completely heads down, and they don't always have time to focus on being a kid and being a young person in college and all of the experiences that come with that. And I think that that's a surprise for a lot of them, how much time, that they have to put in for that.
The photo shows a young woman who is visually impaired, again with her face obscured, sitting at her dorm room desk and reading with the assistance of a screen reader which enlarges the book pages. Also on her desk are a handheld magnifier and a monocular, which she uses in class and while navigating around the campus.
Learning Ally does not want to imply that all students arrive at college with no preparation. We have some wonderful college preparation programs around the country, we really do. And but one thing that we saw both in our research and then in some follow-up calls that we've made and discussions with students that are blind or visually impaired, even those students that are most prepared and that feel like they are completely ready technology-wise, that they're pretty social, outgoing kids and they understand their disability, even those students had no idea, they had a lot of trouble figuring out what success was going to feel like in college, and they really never felt like they got there. Some of our research participants were seniors in college, so we didn't limit this research to freshmen. And one of the most moving interviews was with a young lady who was describing independence and what it looked like to her. And that independence, the way she described it, she called it strategic independence, which I thought was a great term, but she said, I have to know when to ask for help and who to ask for help from and when to do things on my own. There's a time for each of those. But in my years at college, she goes on a little bit later to explain that while she was in college, she never felt like she did it well. Even as aware as she was of it, she felt like there should have been something better. There should have been some easier way to do this. And this woman is very, very skilled in all of the ways that you would think she needs to be. But I hate that feeling of success was not there. When you talk about helping students thrive and succeed, they need to feel like they're thriving and succeeding, and so that was hard.
Fade to black. Pillar number 5, making technology work for you.
So technology is really vital. That it's so important that they arrive on campus knowing their technology, having their technology, in hand, and knowing how to use it to study or to take notes or, whatever they need to use it for. When they're in secondary school, in the K through 12 area, there's money to pay for that sort of thing. Usually there's money to pay for training for that sort of thing. But if they didn't have either good services and training in K through 12, or possibly they lost their vision, late enough in that experience that there just wasn't time for them to get that, then once you get into college, the funds for that type of training are probably going to be limited. It depends on their state rehabilitation services and whether or not they pay for training, because most colleges will not. And so if they arrive at school not knowing what technology is going to work for them in what method, they're really at a disadvantage. So if, for instance, if this is a student who's lost all of his vision and he hasn't had an opportunity to learn Braille, even though Braille is not found everywhere, no one's going to hand him a Braille book. That's not the point. But a refreshable Braille note taker is very helpful for a student that does read Braille.
A photo shows a young woman who is blind sitting at a table in a student lounge area. Her face has been intentionally obscured. On her laptop, she has opened a document titled Introduction to Political Psychology. She is reading the document with the refreshable Braille display on her Braille note taker.
So he may have to learn to rely on audio. And if you've never been an audio learner, then that's going to be a big challenge for you in college. It's vital that you know before you step foot on the college campus, or even just for a college visit, you need to know what are the platforms that your college uses. So if they use one of the student management tools that are not accessible with JAWS or with Window Eyes, with whatever screen reader you use, you're going to have a lot of problems. You need to know that, going in. And if you do recognize a problem with that and you're set on that university, then the student needs to start advocating with the Disability Services Office right away, so that some type of accommodations can be put in place for that. But the knowledge, just having that knowledge up front that these are the types of systems that my college uses.
A photograph shows a young man who is blind sitting on the bed in his dorm room. His face is intentionally obscured. On his lap is an open folder that, on one side, contains a tactile graphic of a waveform. He is reading a page of Braille text that describes a problem set involving the waveform. These are the types of accommodations that would need to be requested and prepared ahead of the time the assignment was being given.
Very often, the university, but even the Disability Service Office, has no awareness of what makes something accessible. I said earlier that digital does not equal accessible, and they still have the attitude that it does. We've come a long way from, about 20 years ago, let's say. Most things were still in print, and things had to be scanned and then put either into electronic text or into audio, and we've really kind of come past that. But the Disability Service Office does not have an awareness of that, and they don't see that many blind or visually impaired students. And so because it's such a low incidence disability, very often either the student or someone who is helping the student needs to educate the Disability Service Office around what is needed.
Fade to black. Challenges and opportunities.
So in our research, we found that the students who were completely blind felt a lot more comfortable in talking about their disabilities, either with students or faculty, than students who were maybe low vision. And I'm not sure why that is. There is a lot of research out there around that, but the students, for instance, there were two young ladies who are low vision in our research, and they really they have since high school tried to pass as having no vision impairment. And so once they got to college, they wanted to pass as having no vision impairment, but it was not possible for them to. One of the young ladies is one who has dropped out of college since and is just kind of rethinking how she wants to go back in on this. But that's just a really hard part of it. If you're not willing to talk about who you are and what you learn, then the people that are willing to accept you that way for what you are, because I have found with all my kids that have gone to college that college is something that opens people's minds. Any kind of education is going to open your mind, and students are probably at that period when they're most willing to accept somebody else with a difference, And so, but if you're not willing to be a little vulnerable to that, it's going to be hard for anyone to know, first of all, but to be willing to accept you as the authentic and wonderful person that you are.
In a photograph, we see an email from a college disability services office to a student who is visually impaired. The student had written to request accommodations. Among the accommodations granted are the use of a calculator and tape recorder, low vision aids, and extended time to complete in-class tests. The student was also encouraged to contact her professors before the start of classes to discuss how the accommodations would be implemented.
On the research for the college program, we saw that students need a lot more support especially during that first year of college. And they need to be both better prepared before they get there, but then they need active support and almost 24/7 support of some kind, so that when they need it, it's there for them to find. And so that's what led us to deciding that we also want to serve our students who are blind and visually impaired in a more whole manner and look at how we can help. So through the research, we decided that we needed to serve them both with resources, knowledge about what resources are out there, build some resources of our own that maybe aren't already existing, that talk directly to the student, that it's in their voice, so that hopefully they can engage in it, but then also make the engagement piece, so how you do your website, or what's the experience when they come to you, is it a podcast, is it a video, is it an article or a quiz or a self-assessment of something. Make it engaging so that they'll want to do it. And then the third piece to it is, would they benefit from having a mentor? So a college student who is possibly working on a postgraduate degree of some kind, who's blind or visually impaired, who has had similar experiences and who made it, and who can then turn around and in a manner that is very similar to what their experiences were, really be able to talk to these to young students about that, or to any student that's new to the college experience. So we're developing these now, and it's been really fun. The first area that we really want to build some resources for students is around empowering them to, when we talk about advocacy on your own behalf, sometimes that means you need to have the ability to maybe disrupt things a little bit, and to not allow the status quo to be okay. Because if it's not okay for the way you learn, then something needs to change. And so we're building resources around that, not only the advocacy piece, but the piece around it's okay to let people know what you need. And if it's not already there, then it's okay to ask for it, and to keep asking for it, and to be possibly a little firm about the way that you ask for it. It's okay, because your education is important, and it's worth it.
For more information about Learning Ally and the resources they can provide, go to learningally.org. Fade to black.